People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. Now, with France on fire, 40,000 police on the streets, children as young as 13 looting, we ask, has Macron lost control?
The Court of Appeal have left the government's plan to send people to Rwanda in tatters. We're going to be asking an immigration lawyer, were the court right to make that decision? And where did the government go from here?
And a report came out this week about equality in cricket. So we'll be speaking to Sharon Davis, former Olympics winner, to say, should men and women get paid the same in sport?
And from one sporting legend to another, we've got the legendary former football manager Harry Redknapp joining us. All of the transfer stuff that's been going on through the summer, he'll be giving us his insight into which team is best placed to win the Premier League this season.
And should men and women footballers be paid?
I
bet you he's got an opinion on that. And don't...
And don't forget, we want to hear your views as always, so please email us, gbviews@gbnews.com, and we'll read out as many of those as we can throughout the show. But first, here's the news headlines with Tamsin.
Phil, thanks very much and good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 10. France has been hit by a 4th night of riots, with almost 1,000 people being arrested overnight. Buildings and vehicles were torched and stores looted as violent protests were staged across the country. It follows the death of a 17-year-old boy who was shot by police in a suburb of Paris. Known only as Nahel M, his funeral is set to be held later today. Many of those arrested were teenagers, and the French government is now urging parents to keep children at home in a desperate attempt to restore order. British travellers are also being warned to be aware of the unrest, which could restrict their movements. Jeremy Clarkson's column about Meghan Markle, published in the Sun newspaper, was sexist, according to a press regulator. Ipso ruled some of his comments about the Duchess of Sussex were pejorative and prejudicial. Clarkson wrote he'd dreamed of Meghan being paraded naked through British towns and publicly shamed. 25,000 people complained. However, the watchdog rejected complaints the article was racist, inaccurate or harassed the Duchess. The senior detective who survived an attempted murder in Northern Ireland was given a standing ovation at an awards ceremony.
The Chief Inspector, John Caldwell.
DCI John Caldwell received the Special Recognition Prize at the Sunday Life Spirit of Northern Ireland Awards. The detective was seriously injured when he was shot by dissident Republicans in Omagh in February. The Prime Minister presented the award via video link, calling DCI Caldwell a true hero of Northern Ireland.
It's a real pleasure to present the Spirit of Northern Ireland's Special Recognition Award this evening to someone that I admire hugely, a policeman, a father, a husband, a football coach, a man who, when his own life was in danger, was still thinking of others.
A teenager who died after being found in a canal in West London with stab wounds has been named. 17-year-old Victor Lee was found in the water in Ladbroke Grove on Sunday. He was pulled from the canal and died on the scene despite efforts to save him. 3 boys aged 14, 15 and 17 have been arrested and remain in custody. Police have renewed appeals for information and witnesses. Households are being urged to take an energy meter reading today as the new price cap comes into force. Regulator Ofgem says the average price people can be charged has fallen to just over £2,000. Bills are still much higher than 2 years ago, though, and Shadow International Trade Secretary Nick Thompson-Simmons says that's the government's fault.
The position here in the UK, looking at the rise in energy prices since September 2021, is uniquely difficult. It's a 62% increase since then. It's the equivalent figure for Germany is 38%. For France, it's 28%. Now, why are we so uniquely exposed? It has to be the Conservatives' energy policy over 13 years.
Holidaymakers driving in Europe are facing higher fuel bills in most destinations than before COVID. New analysis from the Post Office found Switzerland has the largest hike in prices out of the 17 nations included in the research. Forecourts in the country have increased average prices per litre by 38 pence for petrol and 42 pence for diesel since 2019. The world's largest airliner is returning to Birmingham Airport as Gulf carriers ramp up capacity. Emirates will resume using its 615-seater Airbus A380s from today for one of its 2 daily return flights between the West Midlands and Dubai for the first time since the pandemic. Meanwhile, airline Saudia will start serving Birmingham Airport from tomorrow with 3 return flights per week to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. Iced coffee drinks from high street chains can contain exceptionally high amounts of sugar. A survey by consumer advisor Which has found many have more sugar than a Mars bar or a can of Coca-Cola. One of the unhealthiest options was a Starbucks caramel frappuccino containing 48.5 grams of sugar, nearly 20 grams more than the NHS recommended daily amount. A UK-backed European space telescope is set to embark on a million-mile journey to uncover the mysteries of the dark universe. The probe, named after the ancient Greek mathematician, weighs 2 tons and will travel towards an area in space where the gravitational forces of Earth and the Sun are roughly equal. The UK has contributed £37 million towards the £850 million mission, with scientists playing key roles in designing and building the probe. The aim of the mission is to shed light on dark energy and dark matter. This is GB News. Now it's back to Esther and Phil.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. Now, over the last 2 days, over 1,000 people have been arrested in France as the riots have become more widespread.
500 buildings have been set on fire and kids as young as 13 are looting. Let's cross live now to France 24, Gavin Lee. Gavin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I mean, what's going on there? I mean, has Macron lost control of France?
I think that for his government, for the security services, for the whole of the 45,000 police are on the streets across France, even the police elite forces, which, go back to 2015 after the Bataclan attacks, the last time they were deployed to try to keep order. This is a real struggle now because it's got momentum and it's turned from those first 2 days after the death of Naël, this 17-year-old on Tuesday, about 9 o'clock in the morning, those first comments from the government saying that this anger, this backlash, this feeling of being the underclass for so many of ethnic minorities in societies in the so-called banlieues and the suburbs, they were targeting symbols of state, town halls, libraries, some of the schools even here in Paris, in Lille. But actually, it's morphed into something else. We're seeing that just behind me, Rue de Rivoli here in the centre of Paris, Zara looted, all sort of a different dimension of social media. Now we're seeing that the looters themselves giving us first-hand view as they go into the store, taking stuff, Nike stores as well. And the scenes in the second and third city, Marseille and Lyon in the south, both we've seen weaponry stores, armories raided for weapons. We've seen footage of Kalashnikovs being used to shoot down CCTV cameras. So Emmanuel Macron saying last night, this is something else. And this odd warning, this warning from mums and dads to say, keep your children at home from now. It's an average age of 17 years old. These arrests being made, 994 overnight, and 13 years old being the youngest. So, yeah, this is a very hard situation that's got momentum now.
Gavin Lee, thank you very much indeed for giving us the latest from France about what's happening there. Very worrying scenes indeed.
But you ask whether Macron's lost control of France. I also ask, has he lost control of his police forces? You've got them saying it's a war on the vermin on the streets. You've got two of them now saying, two police unions saying, if you don't get control, Macron, we might go from war to resistance. This is a serious issue. And later on in the programme, as 2 million Brits go on holiday to France over the summer, we're going to get a report for you whether you should still be going on that holiday.
The other thing is it's the start of the Tour de France today, so I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I wonder what the political ramifications will be, though. I would have thought that Marine Le Pen, politically, will probably be rubbing her hands with glee at what's going on at the moment. So who knows how this is going to play out?
Well, you're right, Phil, because the right-wing politicians are saying we want a state of emergency. Macron doesn't really know what he's doing. People are saying he was too slow to act. He was at a concert with Elton John, and people are just saying, we're unhappy. We've got a real division within France, and we've got basically a civil war going on there. But we'll be bringing you more on that later.
I'm sure it's all the fault of Brexit. Anyway, Boris Johnson has urged Rishi Sunak to push ahead with the Rwanda migrant policy after it was shot down by the Court of Appeal.
In his latest newspaper column, the former Prime Minister says it's not for judges in London to determine whether Rwanda is safe.
Comes as Downing Street insisted it would fight to overturn the court's ruling that sending refugees to Rwanda is unlawful.
Well, joining us now is immigration lawyer Paul Garlick, KC. So let's go back to that ruling, to that judgment there. 2 versus 1 of the judges. People are now saying that judges are overreaching, overstepping their mark. They're going into political decision makers rather than just looking at the law. Where do you stand?
Well, I think that's a complete inaccurate analysis. There are 3 pillars of every democratic society. Parliament, that's the legislature, they make the laws. The government, they propose the policies and they introduce the laws. And then the third pillar, which is essential, is the courts, the judiciary. And what the courts do, what the judges do, is supervise the parliament and the government to ensure that they're acting lawfully and constitutionally. And that's exactly what the Court of Appeal have done here. They expressly said in their judgment that they are not making any comments about the politics or the policies. They're just looking at the facts, and they're looking at the law, and they're applying the law to those facts. And the decision of the court is simply that the deficiencies in the asylum system in Rwanda are such that there are substantial grounds for believing that there is a real risk that persons sent to Rwanda will be returned to their home countries where they did face persecution or other inhumane treatment, when in fact they've got a good claim for asylum. And the result simply is that unless and until the deficiencies in Rwanda's asylum processes are corrected, and there's a proper protection for asylum seekers, then sending people back to Rwanda will be unlawful. And that's just a finding of fact based on the evidence that was put before the court, both by the claimants and by the government, and they're applying the law. And that's precisely what any court should do in a democratic society.
Sure. Paul, can I just pick you up on a couple of things, though? You said at the start that Parliament sets the law. Parliament decided that this policy was one that they wanted to go ahead with, knowing that people were going to be sent to Rwanda. People could have that debate in Parliament as to whether or not it was a safe place to go or not. Parliament decided that. So what business is it of the judges to, in effect, say, well, actually, we think the decision made by Parliament was wrong? I mean, if these judges want to have an opinion about that, surely they should give up their wigs and stand for Parliament.
But Phil, you're completely wrong. That's not what the judges said. They didn't say the Parliament was wrong. They didn't say the policy was wrong. They expressly said they expressed no opinion about that. What they found was that the consequences of bringing into effect the Rwanda return scheme were unlawful. The way that it was put into action was unlawful, not the policy. So you're completely wrong when you say the judges are setting the policy. What they're doing is they're ensuring that the policies are put into effect in a way which is unlawful. And the court made it absolutely clear. When Rwanda improves its system for dealing with asylum seekers, it will be no longer unlawful. And then we can return people to Rwanda.
Paul, you said that it's based on facts. It's not based on facts, is it? This is based on opinion. I mean, the High Court found that well, hold on a minute. The High Court found that the government was right. It was acting lawfully. The chairman of the Court of Appeal decided that the government was acting lawfully. He was just outvoted by two of his colleagues. So the point is here, this isn't a matter of fact that what the government is doing is unlawful. The person who heads up the Court of Appeal thought it was lawful. This is a matter of opinion. And the point is, what basis have the judges got to determine that Rwanda is not safe to send somebody back to? On what expert knowledge do those judges have about the safety of people in Rwanda? They don't know more than you or I do about that.
Well, Phil, again, you're completely, I'm sorry to say this, incorrect and ill-informed. If you read the judgment of the Court of Appeal, I accept it was a majority judgment, but that's not at all unusual. In Parliament, you make decisions on a majority every day. So there's nothing in your criticism there. If you read the judgment, it's perfectly clear they go through the evidence. The majority of evidence came from the United Nations Committee on Refugees and the United Nations Committee Against Torture. It was clear and cogent. Now, the fact that in the High Court there were two judges, they made a finding of fact. You're entitled to appeal against that. They did. And in the Court of Appeal, two of the most senior judges in the country found that on the evidence that the return system was not safe.
So, Paul, are you saying Lord Chief Justice was wrong then? Because obviously he sides with us. Are you saying he's wrong?
Not at all, Esther. Each person, I mean, you and Phil, probably have different views on facts every day, just like judges do. The Lord Chief Justice doesn't have any more power than the other judges. One of the other judges who agreed that it was unlawful is the President of the Court of Appeal. Now, you in Parliament have debates every day. Everybody has slightly different opinions, but based on a rational consideration of the evidence. Now, this case will now go to the Supreme Court, where there will be at least 5 justices, and exactly the same procedure will be gone through there. And
what I don't get, Paul, is how is it that the UN and the EU can send people to Rwanda? So how is it that the UN and the EU can? And that seems safe and fine. Is it because they've got a temporary period which to do it rather than full term? What was the difference that the UK couldn't if the EU and the UN could use Rwanda for their refugees?
it is basically because, first of all, the UN don't use Rwanda for refugees, and the EU have never returned anybody to Rwanda.
They have.
But if
they have.
there
That's
is-
just
if-
not true. They have. They sent people from Libya to Rwanda. They paid for people to go from Libya to Rwanda as refugees. So were the UN sending people to an unsafe place?
No. Again, you see, what you're doing is you're just selecting the facts, Phil. The reality is
I
that in
apologise
that
for
case,
selecting the facts.
there were adequate safeguards in place, clear safeguards, to make sure that the people that were sent to Rwanda would not be sent back to their origin, their country of origin. As soon as we in the UK make sure and change the system to provide those safeguards, then it won't be unlawful, and we will be able to send them back. So you see, you're being very selective about your facts.
As are you, Paul.
Paul Garlick, thank you so much for giving us your legal expertise that we don't have. We're very grateful for you giving us that insight. We appreciate it. Thank you.
So now we're going to.
I'll tell you the one thing he was right about was about how he said there was a vote and that we have a disagreement and all. Yeah. The only difference is I get outvoted 1-1. At least at the Court of Appeal, they do actually get outvoted 2-1. Yeah, exactly. Your vote seems to count more than mine.
But it was interesting that the Lord Chief Justice, the most senior judge, therefore had agreed with us. They sort of hung on the balance that they didn't think that the Rwanda government were going to provide sufficient sort of support for the refugees and not send them back. That was, what they thought there. But joining us now to discuss this is former Labour MP and author Simon Danczuk. Now, the reason we brought you in as somebody who's just married a lady from Rwanda, somebody who goes back and forth, and I think you've got business interests there, or at least you've done work there. Do you think there's something slightly racist here, why people are thinking this is not a safe country to go to? What is going on?
Well, the first point to make is that it's an exceptionally safe country. I have a house there. I visit there several times a year.
I didn't know you had a house there.
Yeah, I'll be there later this month. I've been there many times. I took my children there at Christmas. I wouldn't take them to an unsafe country, would I? And there is no doubt about it. It's exceptionally safe. One of the safest countries in Africa, that by any objective measure. And one of the safest countries in the world. You were right to say the UN have sent Libyans there as refugees, and they've been looked after and cared for. It's a very compassionate country.
I couldn't believe Paul Garlick was arguing on that point.
Well, he's just wrong, yeah, absolutely. And the judges are wrong. I mean, the reality is it's a safe country, and we should be able to send people to that country.
Is part of this historic? Because obviously Rwanda wasn't a safe country and it did have lots of problems, internal problems and all. Do you think this is a legacy from that reputation, that people will think of Rwanda and they think back to the problems it had in the past?
Well, I think that could be some of it. I think your point, Esther, that some people, particularly on the left, are verging on racism in relation to the country, or they don't. The reality is, very few people, I suspect, Paul, or even the judges, have never actually been to the country, and it is verging on racism. This view that it's in Africa, it must be a desperate country, and all the rest of it. Far from it. It's described often as the Singapore or the Switzerland of Africa. So it's an exceptionally safe country. And I think we need to, as Boris Johnson says in his column in the Daily Mail today, I think we need to get to a position where we can break the people smugglers business model so that we can send people there in terms of dealing with the small boats.
And I know we've done an online poll, which we'll be coming to a little bit later, to see what viewers think about how we get this policy back on track to send people back to Rwanda. But coming up in a few minutes, we bring you the top stories of the day with Michael Crick and Simon Danczuk. And don't forget to pop on the radio if you're heading out of the house this morning, because you don't want to miss anything.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. It is 10:25.
And it's time to look at the top stories of the day. And we're delighted to be joined in the studio by broadcaster and journalist Michael Crick and former Labour MP and author Simon Danchuk. So we're going to start with you, Simon.
Yeah, the I newspaper. I saw this early this morning and I was quite surprised by it. Tories consider UK referendum on migrants to win back voters. So the idea is to have a vote on leaving the European Convention of Human Rights. And that's being discussed in government at the moment. And I like the idea. I was surprised and I like the idea. I think we need a referendum to once and finally say, listen, we need to tackle this issue of illegal immigration into the UK. And this will put it to bed by having a referendum on it. Put it to bed.
But might people not say, well, look, the government, why don't the government just do it? You don't need a referendum. They've got a sizable majority in Parliament. Surely they should just be, instead of faffing about with having a referendum, they should just get on and do it if that's what they believe in. And other people might say, well, the rulings of that court are only advisory anyway. There's no mechanism for enforcing them, and so it's a bit of a. They could just ignore the rulings if they didn't really like it, like the Labour Party did when they said there should be votes for prisoners.
But you know how it is, Phil. I mean, we see everybody and anybody attempting to stop the policy of the Rwandan policy, as an example, or in any way of tackling the small boats issue, whether it's left-wing campaigners, the Labour Party, judges. all these attempts to stop it, and I think we need to send a clear message to those minority groups that the vast majority of the public want this issue dealing with, and I think a referendum is quite a smart way of dealing with it.
It's sort of like proof that the people are on the side of this. Well, we did do a Twitter poll there. As planes set for Rwanda remain on the tarmac, should the UK hold a referendum on leaving the ECHR to regain control? Well, in an hour, over 4,000 people voted, and they've said yes, 74%, no, 26%. Are you surprised by that on a Twitter poll, Michael?
Not if it's conducted by GB News, no.
Well, no, not when you know Twitter is 7-1, usually to the left and the right. That's not fair.
No, to be fair, it was a cheap point I was making there, and I'll withdraw it.
Just point that out.
That's what we got you on for. I'm not surprised. You on for that, but I would make a number of points. First of all, we're in danger of having too many referendums. This was the policy of your party at one of the recent general elections, wasn't it, to withdraw from the... May even still be the policy. It can be done through Parliament. Parliament can decide that, and right now it probably would decide that if it was put to Parliament, although there are lawyers on your side who would argue against it. Now, Britain played a big role in the Convention on Human Rights and the Human Rights Court after the war, and it was designed to deal with the horrors of Stalinism and fascism. And I think we should tread very carefully here. But if you want to do it through Parliament, not another referendum. Because we're in danger of having too many.
I agree with that, but I felt it was as if people said, look, do you need proof that this is what we want you to do? You're not listening to us, as you say, politicians, lobby groups, lawyers, whoever.
Would it be
you just need proof.
Would it be a good political tactic, even if you don't approve of it?
Yes, it probably would be a good political tactic, if I'm honest about it, from the point of view of your party. I mean, and, you know, as the poll you quoted probably does show that voters would have sympathy with this, but not all of them, by any means.
Lots of people have come in on this, but 3 different votes here. David says, hi, Esther and Phil, it's blatantly obvious to most of us that the Rwanda plan was always a non-starter, as is all the ludicrous acts of Parliament going through. Philip said, if these people had come in normally via proper routes instead of breaking the law, coming over illegal, then we would have a case to stand on, but they haven't sent them to Rwanda. And Jeff says they should scrap the project and just return the boats back to the countries where they set off from. If the French don't want them, then they should return them back to the country of origin. So 3 different views there from all of the many views that came in.
What's your story, Michael?
Well, the story in the Times about a Church of England vicar called Richard Fothergill, who lives in the Lake District, who's had his account with the Yorkshire Building Society closed down because he protested to the Yorkshire Building Society that they were allegedly pushing a transgender ideology, and he sent in an email to them objecting to their involvement, their activities during Pride Month. Now, I might not agree with his views on that, but I think it's absolutely wrong that anybody should have their bank account closed down for these reasons. And of course, it's only a day or 2 ago that we heard about Nigel Farage having his bank account closed down for reasons that are still not entirely clear. And not only that, he's been rebuffed now in trying to find a new bank account. And he's tried, I think, 7 other banks, and they've all refused him. Now, this is a really important civil liberties issue. Are the banks basically going to decide amongst themselves certain people aren't entitled to have bank accounts? And in the modern world, it's very difficult to survive without a bank account. All sorts of people these days who don't take cash anymore.
Not even that, is it? Your business is online, real-time information to the tax office is online, benefits are paid online. It's not you cannot now
That's
be
right. Try paying
online.
Would you draw a line? Would you draw a line anywhere, Michael?
Well, it's tricky, isn't it? Obviously, criminals, serious criminals, organised criminals, or Russians associated with the Putin regime. It's very difficult, but it seems to me that this needs to be sorted out somehow. And, I mean, I'd love to know the real truth behind what happened to Nigel Farage. And this case just seems ridiculous. And, you know, I'm actually banked with the Yorkshire Building Society. Maybe I might
Don't
change
say
my mind.
anything controversial on this programme.
In fact, I'll probably be banned. I'll probably have my account closed for these remarks. Here, I'll let you know if it happens.
Lots of people are emailing me about this at the moment, deeply concerned. They
Yeah.
said, oh, before we might have thought, you know, the World Economic Forum and the Davos and this, that, and the other was all conspiracy theories. But we don't like the way this is going now. Banks excluding people when we've said how important it is to have a bank account and get paid online.
Yeah, well, first of all, coming from Burnley, I wouldn't dream of banking with Yorkshire Building Society for sure. They won't have me anyway. They banned me before I joined.
Thankfully, Simon, we always have War of the Roses. Thank goodness you're on my side, Simon.
I think we're all... No, actually, we're not. We're 3-1 here, isn't it?
Good. Let's see, outvoted not 1-1 today, Phil of Dave. 3-1. Go on, Simon.
But, credit to Nigel Farage for raising this issue. The banks have been exposed for discriminating against people like himself, but other people are now coming forward. The financial institutions taken a load of money from the public in terms of taxpayers bailing them out, and I think they need to be held to account on this. And they don't give a reason as to why they're keeping you out as well, which is an even bigger issue.
No, it's rumoured in Farage's case that it's Coots Bank, you know, because he's worth so much money these days, which is all part of NatWest. And they haven't said it's not. But I think the banks do need to come out and explain themselves here. What are their policies on this? I mean, it's tricky. You know, if somebody's making huge amounts of money out of child porn, well, I think we'd all sympathise that they should never get a bank account. But, you know, there's an element of it almost being a basic human right that you should be able to have a bank account. I mean, what about people who've just left jail, say? Do they find difficulty opening bank accounts? You probably know better than I do as members of Parliament. And if they do, how are you going to rehabilitate them and all of that?
And to be fair, a lot of supporters, given they're homeless people, are probably the most difficult.
Yes.
And then it is time spent getting them a bank account. But questions to answer from the banks.
Thank you very much, Simon. Michael, we'll see you later. Now, coming up after the report into equality in cricket, we're asking if male and female sports players should be paid the same. Former Olympic swimmer Sharon Davis will be joining us, and Harry Redknapp will be giving us his thoughts on the latest transfer news, including Manchester United, for Michael's benefit, and you certainly won't want to miss that.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The
the Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. Now, following the report into equality in cricket and with Wimbledon starting on Monday, the hot topic of conversation is the gender pay gap in sport.
Wimbledon have already equalised prize money between men and women, yet with men playing more sets than women. Does this seem fair? I'm not so sure.
Joining us now to discuss this is journalist Peter Lloyd. So there you go, there's a question from Phil. Is it fair, particularly if women aren't playing the same number of sets as men, but should we be equalising pay across the board?
Well, first of all, Phil, I love your work. I'm a bit of a fan. And Esther, fellow Liverpoolian, represent. Love it. What a great start to the morning. On the basis that should men and women be paid the same in sport? On the basis that women are female? No. With all due respect, being female is not a skill. It's not an achievement. It doesn't deserve any financial reward. And last time I checked, sport and financial reward for sport was based on skill and excellence. Now that is the calculus which should be made when sportsmen's salaries or sportswomen's salaries are being decided. And this whole argument is so basic. It's a real example of basic bitchery, if you don't mind me saying so early in the morning. I mean,
I've got to give a shout out to the women football players, though. Something men haven't been able to do for ages is win the sort of the Euros. And we did, didn't we? We did well, didn't we, in the football?
Yeah, I mean, they did do pretty well, but let's face it, the bar was pretty low. Women's football is literally in a different league compared to men's. And that is why it's not comparing like with like. If you look at FIFA, for example, that generated something nearly £8 billion in the last 3 years. Women's football doesn't even touch the sides of that. In fact, men's football subsidises quite heavily women's football.
OK, so that's a money matter,
But just let me say, this argument that women and men should be paid the same, OK, but which men? Men aren't paid the same even within the same football team. So what are they talking about? Which men?
Yeah. Fair point.
Peter, when you said it was about skill, I just want to question that a second because, you know, Wimbledon, they have equal pay at Wimbledon. And obviously, we all know that I think it was one of the Williams sisters played against a very lowly ranked man, the man still won, even though he was rated 100 and something in the world. So probably because of physical differences, a top man will beat a top woman at tennis. But surely the key thing here is that Wimbledon, the final, for example, is a sellout, whether it's the men's final or the women's final. So if it's a sellout, irrespective of whether it's men or women playing, surely they should both benefit equally financially from the fact that the ticket sales are exactly the same.
Right. I mean, I obviously wouldn't want anybody to be unfairly discriminated against, but for men and women to be paid the exact same, the variables have to be exactly the same. And as you pointed out at the beginning of this segment, Wimbledon is a prime example of feminism gone off the rails because they equalise the pay, but they expect men to work harder and longer matches. Men have got to perform best of 5 sets. Women only have to do best of 3 sets. That is not equal pay for equal work. Per game, women are earning more money. That is sexism. And I know you have Sharon Davis on the show. She's very vocal about her opinions when it comes to men and women in sport. Why do I never hear women like Sharon Davis talk about this obvious, glaring example?
Well, we're going to ask her.
Well, Peter, your wish has come true.
We're going to ask her that, and you've made some very good pragmatic points.
We're joined now by Olympic medalist and author of the new book, Unfair Play, Sharon Davis, MBE. Sharon, you're probably hearing what Peter had to say there. What do you make of this row about whether or not men and women sports people should be paid exactly the same?
It's not cut and dry, is it? And I do understand some of his points. I take massive offence to the point where he talks about skill. I would say that the women's game was very, very skillful. You know, they had the largest football audience of the whole of last year, so people wanted to watch it. The pay gap is absolutely massive. I've got a lovely quote here, which is from the FA way back in 1922 when they banned women from playing football. It said the FA has had a consultation. Complaints have been made to the football being played by women. Council felt it was impelled to express upon opinions and substantially would ban women's football, and it was not encouraged. Now, for 51 years, women were not allowed to play football because men were in charge of it. That's the same as men have been in charge of the IOC. You know, football wasn't in the Olympic Games until '96. We need to support and to grow the women's game because obviously girls want to do it. Physically, we are different. However, when it comes down to tennis, I agree. I absolutely agree. Women should play 5 sets. You know, and then in swimming, we've worked really hard to get equal events at the Olympic Games for swimming, and now we have that.
I want to point to Sharon there, because I think, in a way, I think you're spot on, Sharon, and I think it makes it fairer and more equal, and it doesn't look as if you're somehow trying to overcompensate the women. I think that would be a fair judgment.
Let me argue against myself, though, Sharon, because I've made that point myself many times, but I'm going to argue against myself because I thought you made a very good point about.
Saves me doing it, Phil. Yeah. Saves me doing it.
You made a good point about skill, because I guess the other argument against that is that in tennis, I mean, I'm not a massive, you know, I watch all sport, but tennis wouldn't be my first choice. But from my observation,
I'll do that for you, Sharon.
My observation in the men's game. The men wangs it down at about 150 miles an hour. The person on the other side of the net doesn't even see it, and that's the end of the point. And then they go on and repeat that every single. Whereas in the women's game, you get much longer rallies because they don't have that same physical strength on the serve.
It's a different game, isn't it?
You get much longer rallies, and so there is
football, really, to a degree. It's a different game, you know, and that power makes a big difference. And in football, it's about 50%. Males kick 50% harder than females kick. So that power that comes from the biology that we have as females means that we have a different kind of skill set. In swimming, I've always felt like there's been great parity. You know, we've had a men's race and a women's race. It's been at the Olympic Games. The cameras are on us both at the same time. And we alternate with our medal ceremonies, etc., etc. Same with track and field. It's in sports where you've got men's leagues and women's leagues, and you've got big history and huge amounts of money. I mean, let's be very honest. Take Chelsea. You know, Chelsea's women's is a much more successful team with results than Chelsea men's. However, one of the Chelsea men's team, we could pay for the whole of the women's team probably 10 times over.
And I think that's
there is ridiculous non-parity.
And that's the point Peter brought up, really, is where the money's coming from, and should that be fairly attributed to the men and women?
But before you go, Sharon, tell us about your book. Yes. Tell us about your book that you've written.
So the book is a history of the battles of women's sport, really, you know, and talking about things like 1% of the sponsorship dollar in America, and it's pretty much the same in the UK, goes to women in sport. 4% of the airtime. So if we can't see it, we can't be it, all right? So part of it is the media trying to promote it. Part of it is big sporting bodies that have historically been very misogynistic, been run by men, and are still primarily run by men in lots of cases, going, OK, how do we help to build the women's game? Here's a really good example. So my daughter was working for Guinness during during the recent Six Nations. She was working for a company. And she was obviously doing placing PR for the men's, and she had no problem. She could place it a dozen times a day. When she had to do exactly the same for the women's teams, the only media were interested in was how difficult it was to juggle being a mum, or where you were going to get your hair done and what makeup you were wearing. Now, so we need to get the media to talk about the sport and the skill and the training. And those rugby girls wanted to talk about that. They didn't want to talk about their hairdressers. But, that is what happened. So the book is a culmination of all sorts of things. It talks about the East German era, which was obviously what I lived through and why I'm so vocal now about trying to fight for fair sport for females. It talks about all the science with regards to the transgender debate. But it also talks about the, historical, unbiased problems that women have had in sport and the ongoing problems that we have in sport. And you think that we're getting better parity, but in lots of ways we're not. We get maybe better appearance of football and rugby and cricket, but when it comes to a lot of the other sports, if I said to you now, could you please name me the best female swimmer in the UK presently? Not sure any of you could do it.
No,
it's a lady named... Yeah, it's a lady called Freya Anderson who won 6 medals at last year's European Championships, and we have 2 British Olympic gold medalist swimmers, females.
Sharon Davis, I'm going to say thank you for all that you do to champion women in sport.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you.
And good luck with the book.
Good luck. And I also want to say, don't think it's only swimmers or rugby players or female footballers they ask about hair. Can I tell you, the same conversation goes on with journalists too, women in politics as well. Not can we talk about policy, but where do you get your hair blow dried? You're quite right. It's something that all the media's got to get away from and actually talk about what the person does. Thank you.
Now, from one sporting legend to another. After a disappointing Premier League campaign for Tottenham, significant changes are taking place in the club, with the signing of James Maddison from the recently relegated Leicester City, and Harry Kane finds himself surrounded by transfer rumours too.
So, meanwhile, Arsenal's third bid of £105 million could take Declan Rice to the most expensive British transfer player ever.
And we're joined now by former Premier League manager and all-round legend, Harry Redknapp. Harry, thanks so much for joining us. Massive changes in the transfer market at the moment. What do you make of what's going on at each?
Before we do that, can I just ask a quick question? Because obviously we were speaking to Sharon.
Yeah, fire away.
We were talking to Sharon Davis there about parity of pay in sport. Where do you stand on that? Is it time that the female football players were paid as much as the men?
Jim.
No, listen, I love the female game. I watch every game. I follow it on weekends on TV. They show you the highlights of all the games. And I think it's fantastic, great. But the crowds that you get at these games, you have to remember, England's games sold out 50, 60, 70,000, whatever at Wembley. The average, crowds at these games are very small. Most of the games are played at clubs' training grounds. They're not even played at the actual stadium. So, the income is not there. There's no way you can be paying the same wages as what you're playing Premier League footballers at the moment. But I do love the women's game, and hopefully that they will keep pumping more.
One day they can dream big. One day they'll get there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Hopefully, yeah, but it's going to be a long way off, until you start drawing 50, 60,000 people every week. That's the only way. And the only way it's going to improve is if they start playing the games at the stadiums. They should play the games on Sunday, the men's team play on a Saturday or whatever.
Oh. Do you know what? We've had this before, haven't we? He's pressed a button and knocked himself off. We'll try and get him back because we want to know about the transfers.
We never even got onto the transfers.
He deliberately did that, didn't he? He didn't want to talk about the transfers.
Last time he was on, he was putting in a pitch to manage Spurs, I think, wasn't he? So maybe it was fearing that we were going to ask him the same question again. Now they've bought James Maddison. I would have thought it'd have been all for him.
And we want to hear what our viewers think about whether men and women should be paid the same in sport. I think Peter had some good points there, whether it was the same time played on a tennis game, 5 sets, or whether it was the take at the gate and the take sort of across.
Well, Harry's right. Harry's point is the right one, isn't it? That it's based on the commercial revenues that if you get in loads of more revenue, then obviously the people playing are going to get paid more. That's just the facts of life.
Football clubs can just about afford to pay their football players, can't they? They're charging so much now.
Yeah, well, they can't. Well, they can't. Most of them.
Exactly.
Most,
Right, look, we're trying to get Harry back, but look, we'll come back to him when we can. Still to come, France is on fire. So, hang on, who have we got there? Did I hear we had Tony?
Yeah.
OK.
We've got Tony. I think he's in Aberdeen. There's a big event going on in Aberdeen. I think a military event is going on in Aberdeen. And hopefully, while we try and get Harry back, perhaps we can get to Tony.
Oh, here he is. Here he is.
Look at Tony.
Perfect. Look at that Aberdeen, great big Aberdeen sign behind us. Sun is shining. Tony, tell us what's happening, because it's a big event at 11 o'clock today.
Good morning. Yes, indeed it is. The crowds are finally coming out. The rain has subsided. The sun is out, and the granite of the Granite City is now starting to sparkle. Just behind me, you can see right up Union Street, and down there in about 9 minutes, we're going to see the Armed Forces Day Parade make its way through Aberdeen. Quite an exciting event. We're going to see about 1,000 military personnel from various regiments and our armed forces come all the way down to Castlegate here and waving at the crowds. And of course, earlier on this morning, we met the Lord Lieutenant, usually the Lord Provost of Aberdeen, who was going to be at the bottom here, giving a wave to all of our troops. Aside from that, we've been promised some rather loud motorcycles, which will hopefully finally drown out these blasted seagulls, which I think are at risk of threatening everyone's dead. Surely, if not the motorcycles, at least the mass pipes and drums marching down the street, entertaining the audience, will do the job just fine. Certainly no royal family here today, but you know, we do know that there's quite a strong bond between both the armed forces and the royal family and the city of Aberdeen, quite strongly. Certainly there's going to be a lot of that thinking as we look ahead to the week, and quite a big week relationship between the royal family and Scotland, as King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla are expected in Edinburgh for their special celebration midweek. So yes, we're almost at the start. Certainly the next time you come to me, we'll have a bit more colour for you. But the sun is out, the crowd is very much anticipating, and it's sure to be a fantastic late morning and afternoon.
Tony, thank you so much indeed for bringing us the latest from Aberdeen. It looks absolutely glorious there. I used to spend an awful lot of time in Aberdeen when I used to work for Asda. When you were a senior manager at Asda, you had to have an adopted store that you had to visit once a month to keep you in touch. And mine, I drew the short straw. Mine was in Aberdeen, so I had to go up to a store in Dice near the airport on a regular basis.
Short straw only because it was so far away, nothing to do with Aberdeen. Yeah. But John says here, surely the role of a bank is to provide a service to people irrespective of their politics. They are not supposed to engage in social engineering and should risk losing their licence if they do. This is the story today about banks closing people's accounts. Well, look, still to come, France is on fire, and will your holiday plans be in ruins as riots are threatening to stop all travel to France? Simon Calder will be joining us with the latest on this.
And beware of love online. We speak to Rachel, who lost over £113,000 to her online lover.
And have William and Kate won the battle with Meghan and Harry as their ratings, that's Meghan and Harry's, hit rock bottom? We'll be joined by our royal correspondent shortly.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather. This weekend it's fairly blustery. We'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers, the best of the sunshine across southern parts of England and Wales. And looking at the bigger picture, low pressure is in charge of our weather. We can see a northwesterly flow, tight isobars across the UK indicating that blustery weather, and that continues for much of the weekend. Through the rest of Saturday afternoon, there'll be some bright or sunny spells, best of the sunshine developing across southwestern parts here. Showers most frequent across the northern half of the UK. Some of these will be heavy at times, and some heavy and persistent rain for Shetland too. Some localised flooding possible this weekend here. Temperatures generally the high teens to low 20s, so a little fresher than it has been of late. Into the evening time, we continue to see showers across the north of the UK, still filtering their way southwards overnight. Clearest skies across central southern parts of England and Wales, and that rain just pushes a little bit further south into mainland Scotland. Temperatures with that breeze around generally hold up in double figures. So it means a bright start to Sunday, but fairly blustery, particularly across the north and the west. Frequent showers being blown in on that breeze, and then that persistent rain still affecting northern parts of Scotland, which could be heavy at times. Into the afternoon, best of the sunshine will be across the southern half of England and Wales, unbroken in places, and this will lift temperatures here to around 23 degrees. A little bit cooler with that breeze across the northern half of the UK, 17 to 20 Celsius. Into Sunday evening, we'll eventually see this rain start to peter out across northeast Scotland, but showers do continue across the rest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, clearer spells to end the day further south. Looking quickly into next week, further blustery showers around, particularly at the beginning of the week, temperatures around average.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. Now with France on fire, looting, rioting, protests, and with 2 million Brits set to go on holiday there this summertime, we ask, is it safe to go?
And should you beware dating online? We're going to be speaking to a woman who lost over £100,000 to her online lover, and she now wants to warn other people from making the same mistake.
And we see on TV, online, women attacking women. We're asking, is there now the rise of the female thug, and how has it come about?
And in the Battle of the Royals, are William and Kate running rings around Meghan and Harry? We'll be speaking to royal commentator Judita da Silva to get her view. And of course, we want to hear your view, so make sure you email us gbviews@gbnews.com and we'll read through as many as we can. In the meantime, here's the news headlines with Tamsin.
Phil, thanks very much. Good morning from the GB newsroom at 11:01. France has been hit by a fourth night of riots, with more than 1,300 people being arrested overnight, the Interior Ministry there says. Buildings and vehicles were torched and stores looted as violent protests were staged across the country. It follows the death of a 17-year-old boy who was shot by police in a suburb of Paris. Known only as Nahel M, his funeral is set to be held later today. Many of those arrested were teenagers, and the French government is now urging parents to keep children at home in a desperate attempt to restore order. British travellers are also being warned to be aware of the unrest, which could restrict their movements. French-Algerian journalist Nabila Ramdani says the divide between citizens and the establishment has widened.
We have a police union describing the rioters as hordes of savages and indeed vermin. Now, this is just a kind of inflammatory and, dare I say, colonial language that sums up the divide in France at the moment between a reactionary establishment backed up by a hugely powerful security state, including many paramilitaries, and lots of people from ethnic minority backgrounds who feels as though they are discriminated against in every aspect of their lives.
Jeremy Clarkson's column about the Duchess of Sussex, published in The Sun, was found to be sexist by the press regulator. The former Top Gear star wrote that he dreamed of Meghan Markle being paraded naked through British towns and publicly shamed. More than 25,000 complaints were filed, the most ever received by the independent press standards organisation. Ipsos said the article was humiliating and degrading, but it rejected suggestions it was racist, inaccurate or harassed the Duchess. The senior detective who survived an attempted murder in Northern Ireland was given a standing ovation at an awards ceremony last night.
Chief Inspector John Caldwell.
DCI John Caldwell, who received the Special Recognition Prize, thanked his family for their support as he spoke publicly for the first time. The detective was seriously injured when he was shot by dissident Republicans in Omagh in February. He said he was sorry children had had to witness the horrors of the attack. The Prime Minister presented his award via video link, describing DCI Caldwell as a true hero.
It's a real pleasure to present the Spirit of Northern Ireland's Special Recognition Award this evening to someone that I admire hugely, a policeman, a father, a husband, a football coach, a man who, when his own life was in danger, was still thinking of others.
Households are being urged to take an energy meter reading today as the new price cap comes into force. Regulator Ofgem says the average price people can be charged has fallen to just over £2,000. However, bills are still much higher than 2 years ago, and Shadow International Trade Secretary Nick Thomas-Simmons says that's the government's fault. A teenager who was stabbed to death in West London has been named by police. 17-year-old Victor Lee was found in a canal in Ladbroke Grove last Sunday. He was pulled from the water, but despite efforts to save him, he died at the scene. 3 boys aged 14, 15 and 17 were arrested yesterday and remain in custody. The world's largest airliner is returning to Birmingham Airport as Gulf carriers ramp up capacity. Emirates will resume using its 615-seater Airbus A380s from today for one of its 2 daily return flights between the West Midlands and Dubai for the first time since the pandemic. Meanwhile, airline Saudia will start serving Birmingham Airport from tomorrow with 3 return flights per week to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. Iced coffee drinks from high street chains can contain exceptionally high amounts of sugar. A survey by consumer advisor Which has found many have more sugar than a Mars bar or a can of Coca-Cola. One of the unhealthiest options was a Starbucks caramel frappuccino containing 48.5 grams of sugar, nearly 20 grams more than the NHS recommended daily amount. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Tamsin. Rioting and looting and France is on fire. Is this the best place to be going on holiday this summer?
Yeah, the UK government have released new travel advice urging Britons to avoid the riots, saying their locations and timings were unpredictable.
The Foreign Office have not yet changed their advice to warn against all but essential travel to France, saying it was more important than ever to get travel insurance. Well, joining us now is travel editor for The Independent, Simon Calder. So, Simon, what do you make of the travel prospects for people? About 2 million people apparently go from the UK to France over the summer. What do you make of their prospects?
Well, even more to the point, this weekend, 260,000 people, British travellers, going on holiday to France, I calculate. Most of them flying, but a good number also on Eurostar. There's more than a dozen trains today, and they're pretty much all full. Similar numbers tomorrow, and of course all the ferries from Dover to Calais and Dunkirk, and then Newhaven, Dieppe, and all the Western Channel ferries as well. So we are at the start of July, as normal, heading for France in very large numbers, and of course everybody is thinking, well, what awaits us when we get there?
Can people change their plans? Can they get refunds on their tickets and things like that at this stage?
Really good question. Now, as you mentioned, there is no Foreign Office advice saying do not travel. If there were, then immediately you would expect to get a refund on your airline ticket, on your package holiday, or whatever you've booked. I think we are some way from that taking place, and in fact I would be very surprised if we did, even with these dreadful riots going on, if we saw that. If there's a state of emergency declared by President Macron, there may be. But to answer your question, if you're on EasyJet, which is Britain's biggest budget airline and has dozens of flights to France, they are saying this weekend, if you're booked to travel and you're feeling uneasy about it, give them a call. They will allow you to switch to another flight, which might be in a couple of weeks' time, or you were flying to Nice, you'll go to Milan in Italy instead, and they will waive the normal £49 per person change fee. So that's one option, but talking to the ferry companies, talking to Eurostar, it's just business as usual. You're assumed to be going. And to be fair, I think the vast majority of tourists probably won't notice much. The main thing that might affect them is if they are planning to use buses and trams and so on.
You did say, what will you get when you arrive there? And the things like buses and trams are stopping at 9 o'clock. Some of the public parks are closing at 5 o'clock. I'm wondering about some of these buildings, as 500 are up in flames, what you might be doing or not doing, and some of the big concerts have been stopped.
Well, yes, and that is a really serious concern. If it starts spreading, if it gets in towards the tourist areas, and bear in mind that France is the most popular country in the world for incoming tourists. So therefore, tourism essential for them. But similarly, you're in the middle of a beautiful city such as Paris. If this trouble starts coming in from the suburbs, from the banlieue into the centre, that could signal problems.
Well, my dad's going or hoping to go in a few weeks to Paris. So I'm wondering, should he be thinking now to change his flights?
No, I'm going on Monday.
You can tell us on Tuesday whether he's right to go in a few weeks.
Exactly.
saying go. Be careful.
Well, yes, I mean, you're
like KTD you are, Simon. Everywhere you go, there's a crisis or something. We sort of rely on you to report from some crisis area with travel.
Phil, that's very kind. But no, most places in the world are going to be absolutely safe. Of course, yes, you should. My only rule really is if I see any trouble breaking out anywhere in the world, I walk very quickly in the opposite direction. And that's effectively what the Foreign Office is saying, but also monitor, they say monitor local media. I think that suggests a command of French that me and many other people don't have. But obviously, just ask around, see what's happening, be aware of your surroundings, and it should be fine.
And as I keep saying, it's the Tour de France starting today. So that's not a great backdrop for that, is it?
Yeah.
Simon Calder, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to date on that. Lots of you have been getting in touch, so let's have some of your views here. We're talking about the planes to Rwanda, sat on the tarmac. What should we do? What did the Court of Appeal do then? It says, Alfie says, the Court of Appeal are not fit for purpose. If the government had won the case, the lawyers would still have taken their case against the government to the Supreme Court anyway. Why waste this time and taxpayers' money?
And we were talking about equal pay in women's and men's sport. Victor says when a woman's sport attracts the same revenue as the same men's sport, then the money should be equal. If not, then no. Which I think pretty much summed up what lots of people were saying, including, I think, Harry Redknapp, when we had him on earlier.
So let's take a look now at the top stories of the day. We're delighted to be joined in the studio by Member of the London Assembly, Sean Bailey, and broadcaster and journalist Michael Crick. Great to have you both with us. Quick change there. Sean, Simon, a couple of seconds ago, Sean Bailey now.
Sean, what's your main story of the day?
I've been looking at the riots in France because, of course, it's been a massive situation of it. Over 45,000 police officers ferried in to deal with it. Been 1,300 arrests. But I think the deeper issue is, what do France do after this about racism in the police force? Because it's been perceived as a very racist police force. And if you have a police force that's disconnected from the public, you cannot govern, you cannot rule, you cannot make that country work. We've had similar issues here, and I want to see how they deal with that, because it's very, very important to the future of France.
So do you think it's France's George Floyd moment? Is that what you think this could be?
I think it's a bit broader than that, because France has often had very rough relationships between the police and poorer communities, and they've addressed it in a very different way to us. In France, you're French first and everything else second. And I wonder if that is going to wash now. And we seem to be approaching a point where we are post the rules. When people are upset, it doesn't matter why they're upset. It's the fact that they are upset that's important, and the French will have to deal with it, because there's a definite disconnect between the ruling class, the political elite, and communities.
Can I say I went to France Stadium with a pen pal, and I must be going back, 30-plus years ago. There was already problems there with how the Muslims and the Nigerians were moved to the suburbs. Yes. There was a problem then, and this now has built up over decades.
You've seen it, because what we have in Britain, particularly in a place like London, is much greater mixing in our communities. I think France has more separation, and you're seeing the results of that today.
Sean, it'd be remiss if we didn't mention congratulations on your appointment to the House of Lords, by the way. We haven't seen you since.
Thank you.
But also, obviously, since we last saw you as well, there was all the video footage of what was going on in CCHQ, which, as I understand it, was a party during lockdown, which was related to your candidacy for the mayoral elections. What did you make of what was seen? Were you sort of in the thick of that? What happened?
What happened was members of my staff and some CCQ people had a party which I was never at, and I think over the weekend some journalists tried to make me the story, and the only part where I really linked the story is that where it was my team, I took some responsibility and apologised, and because I understand that people, had real heartache about that point in the country's life. Not seeing parents, not being able to go to hospital and visit people who are dying, etc. So I took some responsibility for it. But at the end of the day, I wasn't at a party at all. And for all the rubbish that's been written about me, they had to concede I was not at the party. But let's say the video, I think, was new. I never knew it existed. And I think it reignited for some people what had been done. But the police had certainly cleared me. And they'll do whatever they feel they need to do next.
It's interesting, the anger hasn't abated at all on this subject, has it? In a way, it's sort of growing, don't you think, with parties in lockdown?
It depends who you speak to, because obviously I've been written to by hundreds of different people and spoken to people in the street, and some people are saying, was this just a ruse to get Boris, to get the Conservative Party? Other people are saying it feels very personal to them because of the loss they face in their life. So I think people's opinions on a party are set, people's opinions on Partygate are set, and there's very little that can change that.
And there's a photograph, isn't there, that... I mean, you're said to be in a photograph of one of these parties. Is that just somebody else who looks like you?
No, that's me and my team at our Christmas party. So at the time, it wasn't in lockdown, and I took a picture with my team, and I apologise because I think people were quite upset about that. But the idea that I was at a party is wholly incorrect, and ultimately the press had to come to that conclusion because the police did.
And just quickly, Sean, what do you make of Daniel Korski's withdrawal from the London mayoralty election? And do you think the Conservatives should reopen the selection, number of people who the members can choose from?
I think he had to withdraw, but that's a personal decision for him. He'll have to go away and figure out what he does next about clearing his name or taking penance for that. As for the party, I don't think they need to reopen the situation because two of those three people were always going to be eliminated, weren't they? It's just that he's been eliminated under a dark cloud, and the party has its rules and it will keep going forward. To reopen the situation would delay it all, and as someone who ran for a very long time, you don't want to delay.
OK, thank you for that. Now, Michael, I want to get your opinion on this, because the thing that got me exercised this week in the papers was yesterday in the Daily Mirror, which I don't know if there's a paper of your particular choice. But on the front page of the Daily Mirror yesterday, there was a letter from a 7-year-old child urging the government, there it is on the screen for people who are watching on the TV, urging the government to introduce free school meals for everybody at primary school. Now, whatever the merits of the case, what exercised me about this was the use of a 7-year-old child to make this particular case. And there were three things that struck me about this. The first is that why is it people on the left think that the argument of a 7-year-old adds credibility to an argument? It seems to me that you would think for most rational people it wouldn't really add credibility to an argument, but people on the left always seem to think it does. Two, perhaps it shows that the level of argument on the left never really gets beyond that of a 7-year-old, and if that's the best argument that they can come up with, that their sort of thought process never gets beyond that of a 7-year-old. And the third bit was that it's quite sinister, but in the sense that I think, in my opinion, they use a letter from a 7-year-old because he thinks that nobody will then be able to criticise it. It makes it immune from criticism, and therefore, no matter how bonkers the idea is, and I'll put that in that particular category, nobody could dare criticise it because it was done by a nice 7-year-old. What would you say to my three points that I'm directing at people on the left, and the Mirror is very much...
Well, I'm going to distress your producers here, but I agree with nearly everything you say there, so there isn't going to be a huge amount of discussion. It's a bit like the use of celebrities in politics as well. I mean, why is the views of a pop star or a film star, worth any more than an ordinary member of the public? But in this case, I think, we do now live in a world where we're very careful about the use of children in the media and their view. Now, clearly, this is a girl, I think it is, isn't it? Her parents would have approved. But you're right, that nobody can reply. I have to say, though, that, your party conference often has some very young speakers. I mean, William Hague was 16 and then it goes down, but they're not quite as young as 7.
I think they're young, up-and-coming, and it's not using them
well,
on
maybe this girl is going to be Prime Minister in about 20 years' time, I don't know.
But what I've also
or Mayor of London.
thought is, it sort of adds into, for me, the whole crumbling of adults being adults. They can't make their argument themselves, so they feel a child should make it forward. And I'm seeing this a lot in society. What does a child think? What does anybody else think? Oh, your mum and dad can't decide. What would you like to do? How can we do that? And that, I think, is a dangerous path. Their adults are fighting to be adults.
It's actually sinister because the people behind the sentiments you're talking about and this letter are actually using it to get adults' views across, but not challenge. Let's be clear, if you're going to give free school dinners to everyone, you're also going to be feeding Premiership footballers' children as well. So, but that won't get challenged if you put it through the voice of a 7-year-old. And the other deeper thing as well, papers like the Mirror are always trying to couch the government as inhuman, and challenging a 7-year-old or not responding in kind to a 7-year-old does that for them.
But we've got to recognise that actually the issue at the heart of this is a serious one, and that is that there are lots of young children in very poor backgrounds who are not getting proper meals a day, and the sentiments behind the letter and the Mirror's campaign are very good. I mean, whether I agree with the policy, I'm not sure, but I think it is an important issue that deserves our attention.
Let us let you get onto what story do you want to raise?
Well, I want to raise the story about, it's on page 2 of The Guardian, not a paper that either of you read.
We moved from the Mirror to The Guardian. I can see everybody switching off.
Suddenly become a very left-wing channel. But no, this is a serious issue because there's a guy called, in fact, I broke this story yesterday on my Twitter feed. There's a guy called Neil Lawson who runs a think tank called Compass, a left-leaning one, used to be an advisor to Gordon Brown, and he's being threatened with expulsion from the Labour Party because in a tweet, 2 years ago, he retweeted a tweet which was basically calling for tactical voting. You know, that this idea that people on the left, they cast their votes where they're most likely to get the anti-Tory candidate in, not something that you'll believe in, either of you two. But, and he's been threatened with this, and he's saying, you know, it's utterly, that the Labour Party has been captured by a clique who only see true believers or sworn enemies. They're behaving like playground bullies. It's a petty tyranny, says Lawson. It'll be tragic if this is the culture Labour takes into government. And it's worth remembering, it's not long ago, 2019, that Tony Blair actually called for tactical voting in the 2019 general election. But there's no sign of Starmer and his mates expelling Tony Blair yet. That would be a good story, wouldn't it?
It's interesting, though, that, you know, Tony Blair allowed Jeremy Corbyn to be a Labour MP when he was leader.
Exactly.
But Keir Starmer won't allow him.
Well, I do think that Starmer is the most authoritarian leader of the Labour Party there's ever been.
I guess the question I've got on this is that they've got a Conservative MP who defected to... I know. So they've got somebody who stood for the Conservatives in 2019, that's fine.
And attacked Labour in the most virulent terms when he did.
There's no real logic to it.
No.
I'm quite sure there will be tactical voting. Keir Starmer will be doing some with the Lib Dems across seats across the country.
Oh, he already does it.
Exactly. So
in all these by-elections, he does it already. I mean, Labour had no
nonsense.
campaign in North Shropshire, and the poor candidate was very distressed because nobody was coming to support him.
But it is sinister, a tweet that you've retweeted 2 years ago, which is something that lots of people do.
It's the fault.
Sean.
What you're seeing with Keir Starmer now is an iron grip. It's a very narrow Labour Party, and what's interesting that Labour Party and Conservatives are best when they're broad, and I think Keir Starmer.
That's exactly Neil Lawson's point. Yes. Pluralism, a little bit of everybody. Yes. Broad church. Because if you're in government, you need a few people who in your party are going to say, "Are you sure you're doing the right thing here?"
Right.
That's sort of thing you two do all the time.
Michael, Sean, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Now, coming up, have you ever been targeted online by someone that seems too good to be true? Well, our next guest shares with us how this cost her £113,000. You heard that right, £113,000. You don't want to miss it.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio, and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning, live with Esther and Phil. The time now is 11:26.
Now, a woman was scammed out of £113,000 on Facebook's dating site. Rachel Elwell, the scam victim, has spoken out to try and protect others from the same fate.
Rachel now works as a spokesperson for the Economic Crime Victim Care Unit, where she works to help raise awareness for romance scams. Well, we're joined by Rachel now. Good to see you, Rachel. So tell us, what actually happened? How did this person manage to hook you in?
So initially I joined a Facebook dating website, and it's a bit like if they like you and you like them, it opens up a platform for conversation. But this guy actually gave me a right sob story. And before any of the fraud sort of started, and this is what people need to recognise, they don't just contact you and ask you for money. They build up a background. It's all obviously very fake. But he told me that he'd been widowed 7 years earlier, lost his wife to breast cancer. His daughter was only 10 at the time, and he spent those last 7 years trying to come to terms with his loss, bringing his daughter up, and just building this picture of making me feel sorry for them and almost responsible in a way. And after that, that's the initial hook, and that's where they get you in, where you feel responsible to help them financially.
Now, I get the first amount is about £250 or £500, so they're sort of easing the way in. But 113,000, was there no way along the journey you either thought it was a scam or you could stop it? What was he doing?
I challenged it at every step of the way. And actually the very first payment, which is quite common, is the most difficult for you to send, because that is the next hook after they built up their fake profile and their fake story. But once you are committed and you have sent one payment, irrespective of the value of that payment, any subsequent payments you send are to protect any previous payments. Because in my case, I believed I was going to get the money back. It wasn't giving the money away. I believed it was a loan. So you think, if he can't pay the tax bill, he can't do the work, he can't pay me back. If he can't get additional employees in to meet the deadline, he won't get the money to pay me back. If the tractor needs repairing, he can't complete the work to hit the deadline, he won't get the money to pay me back. This is how it went on. And throughout that period of additional borrowing from me sending more money, he actually sent me documents. I didn't ask for them, but I think he knew I was suspicious. So he sent me documents from the Ukrainian tax people. He sent me his passport, which I checked. The company that he said were his investors were live on Companies House. I checked them. They were valued at 726 million, and they invested in property portfolio. So everything he sent me, I checked as far as I was able, and it all looked very genuine. He also sent me his flight details, the lot.
But you went to his house, didn't you? Because he didn't live too far away.
Yes, I believed he lived in Coventry, which is another reason why I initially spoke to him, because not that I was looking for the love of my life or anything like that, but I thought if we're going to have a friendship, then he needed to live fairly close. And it was the day that I went to his house, by prior arrangement with him and his housekeeper and his daughter. It was all agreed. I spoke to his housekeeper that morning. Obviously, she wasn't his housekeeper. I spoke to him that day and I went to his property in Coventry, and it was on that very day when I arrived there and there wasn't anyone there with his name, his daughter's name, his housekeeper's name. Then I knew that it was a complete fraud.
Rachel, thank you for sharing your story with us, and thank you for what you're doing too. It's very brave to come out and speak up about these things, and I commend you for doing it, and also for what you're doing to raise awareness, to try and make sure that other people don't fall into the same trap. Thank you very much indeed for doing that. We appreciate it.
Manette, that was sophisticated, wasn't it? Every step of the way, she thought she checked, and then
exactly
what happens? Beware. Now, with ever-changing societal norms, there seems to be a rise in female thugs and violence.
Police have recently launched an investigation into a video online showing a teenage girl being kicked and punched by 2 other females in a park.
But unfortunately, incidents between women like this are becoming increasingly common.
So what's the cause of the rise of this female violence? We're joined by behavioural specialist Johnny Castle. Johnny, what do you make of this? It does seem, from what we see, that there is a rise in this sort of girl-on-girl violence. Is that the case, or are we just seeing more reporting of it?
It's interesting. You know, I work in the space of helping people with their dating and their social life, and the sort of cases that I come across are, you know, people struggling to find the other, and when I'm working with women, I feel it's because they're too in their masculine, and I've definitely seen a rise in this over the years. Why? In my case, in my field of work, I feel it's because of the whole rise of the whole girl boss era, which encouraged us to develop masculine traits.
But it's not just developing masculine.
The world.
John, it's not just developing masculine traits, though. We were just watching, if you're watching GB News on TV, videos of women absolutely kicking a woman on the ground. This is violence beyond, you know, what you could imagine.
I agree, and I think if there's certain parts of the UK that you just will see that, unfortunately. I'm certainly not seeing that sort of behaviour here in London, but unfortunately we do see that in certain places, and maybe it's just a bit more popular to report that right now.
I suppose the million-dollar question is, Johnny, what's the solution to this? How do we tackle it? Do we need to be tougher on these people, send them to prison? I mean, make sure that women are treated in the same way as men are by the courts? What's the solution to this problem?
Education. I feel like we need to, and it's got to be done in a tactful way. But I feel that there is a rise in the space I'm working at right now with femininity coaches. So if we can help women get more in touch with that, then I think that's a beautiful thing.
Johnny,
there's no need for things to escalate to this level of aggression.
Johnny, thank you very much indeed for joining us. The other thing we need to do is get those videos taken offline. They're disgraceful. We don't want to be watching it because people do copy what goes on. In a few moments, have William and Kate won the battle with Meghan and Harry as Meghan and Harry's ratings hit rock bottom? But more after the news with Tamsin.
Esther, thank you. Here are the headlines at 11:33. France has been hit by a 4th night of riots, with the Interior Ministry saying more than 1,300 people were arrested overnight. Buildings and vehicles were torched and stores looted as violent protests were staged across the country. It follows the death of a 17-year-old boy who was shot by police in a suburb of Paris. Known only as Nahel M, his funeral is set to be held later today. British travellers are also being warned to be aware of the unrest, which could restrict their movements. Jeremy Clarkson's column about the Duchess of Sussex, published in The Sun, was found to be sexist by the press regulator. The former Top Gear star wrote that he dreamed of Meghan Markle being paraded naked through British towns and publicly shamed. More than 25,000 complaints were filed, the most ever received by the Independent Press Standards Organisation. Ipsos said the article was humiliating and degrading, but it rejected suggestions it was racist or inaccurate. Speaking publicly for the first time since being targeted by dissident Republicans, DCI John Caldwell thanked his family as he received a special recognition prize at an awards ceremony last night. The senior detective was seriously injured when he was shot in Omagh in February. He said he was sorry children had to witness the horrors of the attack and was thankful none of them were hurt. Iced coffee drinks from high street chains can contain exceptionally high amounts of sugar, with consumer company Which finding many are sweeter than a Mars bar or a can of Coca-Cola. It compared frappes and frappuccinos from Starbucks, Caffè Nero and Costa. One of the unhealthiest options was a Starbucks caramel frappuccino containing 48.5 grams of sugar, equivalent to 12 teaspoons and nearly 20 grams more than the daily amount recommended by the NHS. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, though, back to Esther and Phil.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. Time now is almost 11:40. Now, after a week where the bottom fell out of the joint media career, with the loss of Spotify being called grifters, and it looks like Netflix will also stop their contract in 2025, are Harry and Meghan about to go their own way and do, instead of a joint venture, their solo career? Joining us now to discuss the latest royal news is royal commentator Judita de Silva. So, a bad couple of weeks for them, isn't it? Losing these contracts, people calling them grifters, not knowing how to work, and, you know, they haven't got very many good ideas. Have they played the whole royal game and then their solo careers completely wrong?
Simply put, they did play it wrong. The intention was honourable, but like I've said it several times before, these were two young people that were out of their depth. They've never been the level of fame that they were thrust into, and they were ill-equipped to deal with it and make the right decisions to propel it in a positive direction. When it came to the business of what they did, by Harry's own admission, he was in a situation where he was cut off financially. And so when people were throwing millions at him, his response was yes, yes, yes. He had to make a lot of money quickly to sustain himself and his family. But then once you said yes, people want return on their investment. You were ill-equipped to deliver in the kinds of fields you'd said yes to. When you look at Spotify, people know in the podcast world, Spotify didn't sign you because they cared about the righteous productions you wanted to make. They signed you because you're an electrifying brand and you're clickbait. And in the podcast world, when there is a scandal, what do? You take it to the podcast. You talk about it there because it's you and your listeners. So Spotify is thinking, these guys just have scandal after scandal. They're salivating that when the next one comes, they'll bring it to a Spotify platform. They never did. So Spotify is thinking, I'm going to pay you 20 million and I don't get to feed from the trough of all this attention-generating stuff you do, when attention is the most valuable collateral in the business today.
So you're saying they're naive, really? They were a bit stupid, yeah?
I mean, people have always speculated that Meghan might get tired of Harry, that once she sort of milked his royal connections for all it's worth, she'd want to move on. But in today's Daily Mail, page 22, it says, is Harry tiring of Meghan's showbiz world? What do we think?
The thing is, what they have, I do believe, is just a love that is true and deep, 100%. But what Harry doesn't understand is, while you've criticised the firm, they insulated from the truth of what the real world is. And the kind of real world you've stepped into is Hollywood. Hollywood is brutal and it's vicious. Meghan Markle knows a bit about it, but she is operating at a stratospherically higher level than she's ever done in her life. That is why she's changed management. With Ari Emanuel, you've got a savvy guy who's going to tell you that you are the wife of a blood royal of the most popular royal family in the world. That's cachet. I can craft a career for you. If you get divorced, I can handle that. If you stay together, I can handle that. Harry's going to have conversations. I work in TV and film. I've worked with Hollywood executives. They don't care what you believe in. They can care what they can get out of you. What's sexy about what you're offering me? What's going to make people watch it? Harry now has to have conversations where we don't care about Africa and your ambitions. How do you make me money? He's not used to having to answer those questions or be answerable to people in that way. So he's having a baptism of fire.
Now, I thought the Trevor Phillips interview was interesting earlier this week, where he sort of said Meghan didn't really know what it was like to be black. She learned to be black when she was a member of the royal family. So I read a little bit more and he said, really, again, they played it wrong. UK has the largest uniquely mixed race population anywhere in the world, and it came about through romance rather than coercion, and they could have been the standard bearer for that, and they didn't. What did you think to what Trevor Phillips said there?
On two things, I do agree with the latter part of what he said. Harry and Meghan were potentially Diana 2.0 on steroids. It was played badly. But when he said learn to be black, I found that diminutive and almost, it was offensive to me gutturally. But then I had to take a meta perspective. Trevor Phillips comes from a generation where you capitulate, you assimilate, you turn the other cheek, and he spoke to the kind of racism he had experienced. So in their mentality, which is the generation of my parents and grandparents, there is a way to be black, to make the racist white people you experience in white spaces comfortable with you. So that verbiage exists in their vernacular. I'm from a generation where we don't bend. I'm black, I'm here, deal with me or move out of the way. That's who we are. Black Lives Matter protests proved that. So when he said it, I was offended, but then I stepped back and said, that's the language he understands. But what he should have said is, when Meghan Markle came to the UK, she was, for the first time in her life, she was confronted with being black. And for the first time ever, she had to live according to it, which she's never had to, being light-skinned and white-presenting.
But I do think they missed an opportunity. I thought it was a wonderful opportunity they had there.
A lot of people made mistakes.
We opened our hearts to it, but should Harry and Will, quickly, if you can give an answer on this, come together? It's the eve, or would have been, Princess Diana's, or Queen, would have been Queen Diana, 62nd birthday. Should they come together now?
I hope they will. They did separate messages, but they recognized they had to turn up for this event. What I've said a lot of times is, it's blood, it's love. The people who hurt you deeply are family. But there are two people who can make the reconciliation happen. King Charles can force them to come to the table, but the true key is Kate. She can make William forgive. And if it happens, it will be great, but only time will tell.
So Kate's the key player.
Kate's the key.
Jadita, thank you very much indeed.
I just wanted to quickly say about the homeless initiative that William's come forward with. £3 million, and maybe even, again in the paper today, I will let the homeless live in our palace. Is this a reality? Could he let the homeless live in it? It's not going to happen, is it, in Buckingham Palace, the homeless?
What I say is that the fact he's willing to put his name to it and be willing to fail publicly, it's going to stimulate change, and that's a brilliant legacy to start and something that he can be proud of.
Jadita, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Here's the video that Prince William released to launch the Homewards project this week.
What does home mean to you?
Home is feeling safe and protected in my own bed.
Home is a safe space where I get to rebuild myself.
I don't believe it needs to be this way.
Home as community.
Provided for my family.
Belonging.
Which is why I'm launching Homewards. A programme that commits to working with 6 locations across the UK over the next 5 years.
Home is dignity.
Peace and comfort.
Wherever my dog is.
To show that it is possible to end homelessness here too.
Home is where I feel comfortable enough to be silly and laugh my head off my kids.
Home is being me.
Now it's time for our sports and showbiz update. We're joined now in the studio by sports broadcaster Aidan McGee and showbiz reporter Hayley Palmer. Hayley, we were looking at the showbiz and we stumbled across...
And we thought, Hayley's showbiz today. Hayley's the story today.
Page 24, 25 of The Sun, we saw some glamorous blonde in the paper.
Can I just say, I don't know what I'm doing with my hand. I look like I've got an imaginary drink in my hand, so I don't get that bit.
No distraction, Hayley. We're asking the questions here.
For people listening on radio, we're not going to get into what you might have been doing with your hands in this photo, but it's quite a big piece, this, Hayley.
It is. It's about love, it's about romance. Is this all true? What's happening?
You and Mark the Beast love it.
Yeah, it's all true, actually, because it says that he wooed me with his Toby Carvery card, which is true. He's got a gold one.
And a packet of Maltesers.
And a packet of Maltesers.
I go once a week to Toby Carvery, actually. I do quite like it.
Too late.
I mean, sorry, like, winning combination. So, yes, I have to say it is true, and he's a lovely guy, and...
So it's nothing to do with his brains or anything, then? It was just the Toby Carvery and the Maltesers?
The Toby Carvery card was just like, wow, I can't take this. And the Maltesers is just like, OK...
What do you get for gold membership at Toby Carvery, though?
You can take, I think it's up to 20 people. to Toby Carvery.
Really?
I mean, what more would you want?
I have a supersized plate when I...
So you have enough for 20 people.
I don't go big on the Yorkshire puddings, but I do quite like the choice of meat.
So we're going to have to keep our eye out now in the paper for more info about you and Mark and where it's all going and how it's going.
Yeah.
But he's a nice guy.
He's a lovely guy, and he's very kind, and he treats me nicely, so...
Well, he's a very lucky guy.
He's very lucky. If he's watching, he's very lucky.
Anyway, Aidan, tell us what's happening in the Test match.
Oh, goodness me.
Going from bad to worse.
No, it's terrible. I feel awful thinking about it. But yeah, Bazball. So this is about... I was talking to Anne Diamond about this earlier on. She said, what's Bazball? It seems to me like just whacking the ball out of the court as quickly as you... Or not, sorry, the pitch as soon as you can. And I said, well, yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, Jeff Boycott described it this morning as batting without brains. Somebody else called it kamikaze cricket. It's not working. It's been working for England going up for the previous 13 tests. England won 11 of them. Brilliant preparation going into the Ashes, but they're playing against the world champions. And at the minute, I mean, yesterday they were out. They lost 6 wickets for 46 runs. They closed on 325. If you're getting those kind of numbers, you're not going to beat this Australian side. Don't forget, it's not all about England anyway. The opposition are exceptionally good, as I mentioned, and their captain, Pat Cummins, is extremely inspirational, every bit as much as Ben Stokes is, but they've got a battle on their hand. If they go 2-0 down now, I think it might be curtains.
Would a hot date to the cricket appeal to you with a bucket of Maltesers thrown in?
There are boundaries.
Probably not.
You're not a cricket fan?
Not massively, no. I'm quite good at rounders, though.
Oh, fair enough.
At school a long time ago.
But I'm more interested in what's been happening to Madonna.
Yes, I know. I've been devastated to read this news this week because she's an absolute icon. And I think everyone was quite shocked to read that she had been rushed to intensive care. She had a serious bacterial infection. She was being really looked after in hospital, but I did read last night that she is out of hospital now and she is resting, but she has had to cancel her tour, which was due to kick off on July the 15th in Vancouver. So that's really sad that she won't be able to do that.
And have they I was going to say that, Phil. What's caused it? I mean, I straight away wondered if it is all of the sort of surgical treatment she's been having and the things she's pumping into her face. I wondered if it was that for the bacterial infection. Has anybody
Nobody's got really to the bottom of it, have they?
It's got to be exhaustion, surely. I mean, she's touring so much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think her family was scared they were going to lose her. So it's been quite devastating. But she does seem to be on the mend, and I guess it will all come out, what is the cause of it.
What else is happening in sport, Aidan? Wimbledon starting, Tour de France is starting.
I think Tour de France is interesting. It actually starts in Spain. It starts in Bilbao, but it enters Spain. Sorry, it leaves Spain, enters France on Monday. They're extremely worried about 2 things. Firstly, the climate protests, which happened last year. It was beset by that last year, and it's very dangerous for the riders.
Cycling? Why are they protesting against cycling?
It's not about the event. It's not about the event. Yes, Stephen made this point earlier on. It's not about the event. It's about exposure. They want exposure, of course. Same as Just Stop Oil. Just Stop Oil didn't have a problem with snooker, but they got the exposure by getting onto the table.
Sometimes it's the people who are sponsoring the event as well. They have an issue against, but they have.
That's true.
And I'm so pleased that people, whether it was my man of the match, without doubt, Johnny Bairstow, there yanking him, fold him off, literally like an old ironing board, yanking him off.
He was quite stiff, the bloke, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. That's why it reminded me that he was like an ironing board carrying him off. And then you saw even people now on stag
When did you last
do's.
carry an ironing board? I noticed you doing much carrying an ironing board.
More often than you, Philip Davis. But to be fair, he does take his own shirts to the dry cleaners, which means I don't have to do it. Equally, you've also got the stag do's, haven't they, taking the mickey now of Just Stop Oil. They've become like a group of people for ridicule now.
They've been lampooned,
So you've got the problem of the Stop Oil.
And there's the unrest, of course. Now, they're worried that it's going to go through Paris eventually. There's no sign of this letting up. So they're going to be going through Bordeaux. The riders ride and compete in rural areas on cliff sides and mountaintops, etc., as we're used to, but they stay in urban areas overnight, and they could be targeted from that as well, and they need a good night's sleep. They're in regular contact with the Interior Ministry, the gendarmes are on standby as well. In terms of the climate protest, for the first time this year, you're going to see 2 motorbikes out in front of the peloton. Seriously, just sort of making sure...
What are they going to do? Run them down? What are they doing?
I don't know. I mean, the bikes are quite formidable. I'm not sure what CC they are, but CC could stand for climate crisis, of course.
Any other...
No, that was another buff joke from you there, Aidan. Now, we're moving on from that. Melinda Messenger, what's going on with her? Was gorgeous.
Absolutely, but she's saying that she wants to go grey naturally and gracefully, and there's photos of her on Instagram, still looking fabulous, but she's got a lot of people saying, actually, what are you doing? You're not looking great. I actually think, for me personally, I just want all the help I can get as I get older. My birthday coming up soon. I am getting older, and
Keep it blonde. Keep it
blondes
blonde.
have the most fun.
Hayley, thank you very much indeed. Aidan, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you to all of our guests. We will be back next Saturday morning from 10 a.m. Coming up next, it's GB News Saturday with the wonderful Martin Daubney.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather. This weekend it's fairly blustery. We'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers, the best of the sunshine across southern parts of England and Wales. And looking at the bigger picture, low pressure is in charge of our weather. We can see a northwesterly flow, tight isobars across the UK indicating that blustery weather, and that continues for much of the weekend. Through the rest of Saturday afternoon, there'll be some bright or sunny spells, best of the sunshine developing across southwestern parts here. Showers most frequent across the northern half of the UK. Some of these will be heavy at times and